Hi everyone, welcome to the first installment of PhotoView Fridays. My name is Ron Bates. I'm the Senior Manager of Graphical Applications at SolidWorks. Hopefully my written introduction about what this is all about is enough and you read that. So without wasting more time on the video, I'll just jump in. I thought what I would do today is cover some stuff on basically just lighting, physical lighting, now that that's available with PhotoView. So maybe touch a little bit on quality settings. So basically I have this real simple model, a basic Cornell box, and I will go ahead and turn on the preview window. Use the window just so it's a bit smaller and refines quicker. I could use it integrated, but for now I'll use this. So basically there are no physical lights on. The lighting for models comes from the environment, which is part of the scene that's on the model. So when PhotoView's added in, you'll see what scene is set, in this case 3-point beige. There are two physical lights, which is giving me the lighting for SolidWorks, because SolidWorks requires physical lights for lighting. Right? If I turn off the lights in SolidWorks, eventually I have nothing but black. So we need to have lights in SolidWorks, physical lights, these guys, to see the model. We don't need them in PhotoView. Notice when I turn them all off, PhotoView is still rendering with lighting, and it's taking it from the environment, which is under the scene illumination dialog, or under the scene editor, and we have the illumination tab. So this is providing the brightness. Actually, the environment itself is giving our lighting, and these are some controls for that. I'll talk about those in a minute, but just to get back on track. So basically you choose different scenes. So here, throw on the ambient white, it's a pretty bright scene, and you'll see as a result we actually get quite a bit of lighting inside this box. There's plenty of other environments that are going to give a different effect. If we go, like, for example, to the courtyard, you can see we get shading over on this side here as a result of the sun, which is up there. If we spin the environment around, so this is all lighting and how lighting was done in standalone PhotoView 360. And PhotoWorks used to do this as well, but PhotoWorks always assumed that you wanted physical lights as well. I'll come here and spin this guy around. So now the sun is aimed. You see the shadow here, means the sun's probably somewhere over here, which it is, pointing sort of into the box, and as a result, inside the box is lighter, and I'm actually getting some shadowing happening from each of these little items inside the box. So that's default lighting in 2011. In fact, if you had physical lights on, you didn't know this already, if you had physical lights on in a model for a PhotoWorks rendering, they will now be off. I could go into why that is, but I won't at the moment, and just say if you want physical lights on, you have to explicitly turn them on. So by and large, this is going to give you the best result. But if you have a need to use physical lights, how will you do that? You can just turn them on in PhotoView. So now that I've added this light, actually let's go to a different environment, which will help us see this better. So so basically I have a physical light somewhere over here, and I know that because this is a shadow that's cast by that light in RealView. Turn it on, and actually I don't have shadows on for that light at the moment, so let's do that. Got shadows, and now you can see I have the same shadowing effect from the light in SolidWorks as I do in PhotoView, or vice versa. So let's turn that back off. So that's how it works. So let's say what I really needed was a light inside this box. that, we will choose a point light for that, and just turn preview off while I do this. By default, our point lights go to 0, 0, 0. This model is not centered at 0, 0, 0, so I will go ahead and move this somewhere in the middle, somewhere up here. And this way now it's at the edge. I want it somewhere around. So basically now I have this light up there, center of the box, up the top. So let's turn the preview back on. And it's not going to look any different, and that's because even though I added the light, I didn't choose to have it on in PhotoView, so now I'll go ahead and do that. Actually, I'm going to do that instead of here directly in the Property Manager, so that we can play with some other things. So in the PhotoView tab, I'm going to go ahead and say on. So now you can see I'm getting light from that point light, and I'm actually getting a lot of shadowing from the boxes that are inside relative to where that light is. The intensity of a physical light is different than the intensity of the light for SolidWorks. This is the SolidWorks brightness. Turn it to 0. Has no impact here. That's because we don't want a light to have a sort of unitless 0 to 1 value. We want a light to have a real meaning. So watts per square radian meter squared has real meaning, has units, and therefore can be rendered accordingly, properly. So you change this to change how bright that light is in your rendering. You can control shadow, softness. Sorry. So if you change, you can see the little preview of this point light gets bigger, implying that it's essentially a wider, fatter light. The result of which is soft shadows. So as I go down, you can see these shadows here get harder and harder. So if they're soft, I can also bump the quality up. Anyway, none of that is what I'm intending to really go into here. So this guy's now lit by this light. What if I want to only light it by the light? In other words, I don't want to have any of this environment lighting contributing either. I just want the physical light only to produce the light. First thing I'm going to remind everyone is that by default, lighting comes with every scene, and they're set up accordingly. So that daylight scene, for example, we looked at, we have a physical directional light placed somewhere relative to where that sun is. So by default, you get a shadow in RealView that even sort of matches where the sun is. So all well and good, except changing the scene means all your lights are going to change. If you add a light and you don't want to lose that light when you change a scene, you must check this button, Keep Light When Scene Changes. So I've done that. So now when I change my scene, that light is not going to disappear. So going back to the point of how I render this with the light being the only thing that's modifying, only thing that's giving me my lighting. So the PhotoView, standalone PhotoView 360 2010 way would be to use the pitch black environment. So we have that. I'll go ahead, drag and drop pitch black. Now the only lighting is that point light. And obvious by the fact that you can see I have no shading on the outside of the box. In SolidWorks, when you choose this scene, we actually still give you a tiny bit of ambient, because otherwise your SolidWorks graphics area would be completely black. You wouldn't be able to see anything at all. The intent of the scene is just to give you a pitch black environment in terms of your rendering, so that physical lights are the only thing providing your lighting. There's another way to do this, sort of the long way around, but it goes back to this scene illumination item in the lights folder. I can get to that directly here. It's also just a property of the scene, so I can edit the scene as well and get to it there. These are the controls that have an impact on the brightness of your rendering with regards to the environment and the background. In this particular model, my environment, which is this guy, 3-point beige.hdr, is also my background. That's why I can see this thing behind the model. But we can control them separately. So I can go ahead and turn the background brightness to 0, and I now have no background visible in my rendering. So it's important to note these are PhotoView only controls at this time. So if I go to 0.5, you see this is darker than what it started out as, which was 1. So likewise, the rendering brightness, this might be a bit of a bad name. It's really the environment brightness. It's the brightness of this thing, which is giving you your lighting. So, in other words, I have a physical light. If I change rendering brightness to 0, my physical light is still going to be on. It's still going to be giving light. It's not. This is only affecting the environment. So when I set this to 0, I have basically turned any indirect illumination coming from the environment off. And again, you can see no lighting on the outside of this box. It's black. Now it looks funny because I have this visible environment, and the light is actually shining out of the box, and I can see the ground plane and everything. So if I turn that off, now I am basically the same way I was with the pitch black environment. Scene reflectivity, I don't have anything with really any reflection here, but if I wanted to just kind of control how much of the environment was reflected in reflective objects, I could control that with this. But so anyway, that's how you get physical lighting only to light up your scene. So that's one way. That's using physical lights. Let's go back to default. Whoops, 3-point beige. I'm going to delete my light now. I don't care about it anymore. So now I have back to where I sort of started. So the other way to light a model is to use emissive materials. I'll turn the preview off while I do this. You can see I have a little split line surface up here. I did that so I could add an appearance on this face, which provides lighting. So we've had these now for a while, these emissive materials. There's a few different presets. They're all really doing the same thing for the most part. They're just set up differently. I know area light tends to be the most brightest out of the box, so I will choose that. SolidWorks graphics area just shows it as something white. But when I render, okay, well, you might be able to tell I have a little extra light in there. It's a little hard to tell. Let's try our pitch black environment. Okay, so now you can see I have some lighting in there. It's not a lot though, so in order to change that lighting, again, it's a material, so we go ahead and edit the area light appearance, go to illumination, and this luminous intensity is something that every appearance can have. For most of them it's 0, but for the LED emissive materials, it has a value. Again, it's a real world unit value, watts per square meter squared. I will bring this up, and you can see now I have a much brighter result. The other thing you'll notice though is this is very noisy. In general, area lights tend to produce a little more noise than a physical light, but they also have a lot of attributes that make them more user-friendly, I guess, because you can essentially attach them to any piece of geometry. Now, the other reason that you get a lot of noise in this case is because this is a scene now that is only lit by this one emissive material, and in order to light the scene, the light has to bounce off of everything quite a bit. So this is where the quality slider comes into play. And not the slider, but the quality presets. I will kick off a rendering here at good quality, and you'll see lots of noise. I'll bump this up to better, and hit it again, and not bother pausing the video at this time, because that's also pretty quick. But you can see it cleaned up quite a bit. Still obvious noise in the corners and stuff, but compared to the good, it really cleaned up. let's jump it up to best. Do another render. And I wonder if I should pause now. I will. No, it's almost done. Okay, so that's, didn't pause. So that's 9 seconds. And again, cleaned up more. Again, still some noticeable noise. We can take a look at each of these in our cache. So that was 2 seconds, very noisy. 4 seconds, cleaned up but still noisy. 9 seconds, still visible noise. And we will now go to maximum, say OK, and re-render. Now I think I'm going to pause. Okay, so now you can see it's really cleaned up. You can also see that took 28 seconds, and this is a very, very simple scene. But it cleaned up. So how do we know when to use that? Because what I think is that people tend to use maximum all the time. They think, well, of course I want my final render to be the best possible, so I'll set it to maximum. But the penalty and price they pay for the render time is pretty significant. And my point in this demo here is to let you know that this particular type of scene where I'm lighting the inside of a cavity and essentially all the lighting for the scene is coming from that, and I'm not rendering, basically it's an interior type of scene. I'm not rendering what I would call a tabletop object, something that's just sitting out in the open with an environment around it, providing you lighting. When it's an interior type scene, the light needs to bounce off of everything a lot more to produce a final result that looks good and not noisy. And that's when you really need to go up to maximum. But if you are rendering something, I can just change this scene so we can see SolidWorks a bit more. When you're rendering something, let's forget about the inside of that box. Let's just look at the outside of it. If I was ultimately rendering something that didn't have, this notion of being inside to see what things look like, then I would say you hardly ever, if ever, need to go up to max. And I would say that most of the time you could stick between better and best for your renders. So that's just a little note on quality. The other thing you'll notice is now that I have some environment lighting also contributing to this model, which has this this light, which is just a emissive material, it's not as noisy. I sort of showed the worst case scenario of this light in an environment that's pitch black otherwise. You're going to get the most noise, and that was just to illustrate the differences between the settings. So that's going to be it for today. Plenty of other things we could obviously go into. This was just sort of a random thing I decided to pick on today. I hope it helped to some degree, help some people understand things more clearly. Look forward to any comments, feedback, and certainly input on what could be interesting next time around. Thank you.